In the last two episodes, we focused on the atrocities that took place at the Nova Music Festival and on Kibbutz Kfar Aza on October 7th, 2023. In this episode, we will be discussing atrocities that occurred at other kibbutzim in southern Israel that day. I traveled to Israel in September of 2025 to view some of the sites and speak with survivors and family members of those impacted on that day. Just before leaving the hotel to film, I received an alert on my phone, like everyone else in Tel Aviv, that a missile was incoming and I had a minute and a half to find safety. I, along with everyone else in the hotel and out on the promenade, men, women, children, babies, and pets, quickly filed into the basement of the hotel where we waited for the all clear. Luckily, the air defense systems encountered it and no one was injured. But this is everyday life for Israelis. Drivers stop their vehicles on the roads when these alerts come through and lie on the ground and cover their heads. You know, it's really something we cannot imagine as a daily reality here in the United States. We now turn to the atrocities that were committed on Kibbutz Holit, a tiny little community near the Gaza border. I spoke with a young man named Rotem Matthias, a teenager from Kibbutz Holit, who lived there with his mother and father while his two sisters lived elsewhere. On the morning of October 7th, 2023, his family heard gunshots and texted on the family WhatsApp group. Rotem's parents texted the family that they were scared and in their safe room. Thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us your name, who you are, a little bit about yourself?
My name is Rotem Matthias. I am an 18-year-old kibbutznik. I currently live in Mazkat Batya, which is in the area of central Israel. I work at a veterinarian office. Currently, I also need to do school to finish some of the tests that I need to do so that I'll be able to go to university.
People may not be familiar with the term kibbutznik, is that what you said?
Kibbutznik.
Can you tell us what that means?
So it's like a big family, you can call it.
So what kibbutz were you part of?
I was a part of Kibbutz Holit, which is a very small kibbutz with currently around a little over 200 residents. It's a kilometer and a half away from Gaza. It's a small, quiet place where nobody almost knows about.
And so you lived there with your family?
Yeah.
Your mom and your dad?
Yeah.
Tell us about them.
My dad and mom actually opened a band. It didn't have much success, but my dad leaned into education. My mom turned into a manager in a pharmaceutical factory or something like that.
So take me to the morning of October 7th. Where were you?
So on October 7th, I woke up and my room was a safe room. My two sisters lived in another part of the kibbutz. My mom and dad rushed into my room, and we shut the door. It was the regular protocol for when it happens.
So let me stop you there. What was happening at this point? Was it just
at this
rockets?
time, it was the alerts. I didn't wake up from the rockets. I wake up from the alerts because usually my kibbutz doesn't get a lot of alerts because of our location. So my kibbutz is located in a very small valley. So usually when there are rockets, they pass over the kibbutz. And usually they don't aim for my kibbutz because there is no reason to. There is almost practically nobody there compared to other places. But this time was different because we did get alerts. There were alerts everywhere in multiple provinces, even in the country, which is unusual. Previous operations that were that year, there was a max of 50 rockets a day. But this time there was a lot more. You can see that there were, I think also in Jerusalem, there was in Kibbutz Be'eri, which is like 80 miles or kilometers away from the Gaza Strip. And we stayed in the safe room. We checked up how's our family doing, friends or whatever. My mom and dad called my sisters to tell them to lock the doors and stay in the safe room. Then after a certain amount of time, there was an alert that there was a breach in the border and we need to lock the doors, not answer to anyone, and there's a protocol for that. Very quickly after, I started hearing jeeps, like a lot of cars nearby, motorcycles as well. And then I started to hear gunshots. And then after that, and they were fully automatic, which is not allowed in the army and the IDF. And then also some explosions, yelling. It got closer and closer. And then my dad told me to help him move the spare mattress to barricade the door because we can't lock it. The whole point of the safe room is to protect us from rockets, and if something happens, a rescue team can come in easily to rescue the people who might be injured or whatever. So we barricade.
And let me ask you that. That's significant, right? Because your threat up until October 7th was from the air.
Yeah. So my dad told me to help him move the mattress to barricade the door. My mom told me to lay where the mattress was. My dad picked up a hammer, which was the closest thing he could protect us with. And then we heard glass shattering. At that time, we thought it was in our house. It was from the neighbors. And then we heard gunshots, and it went a little quiet. There were still gunshots in the area, but then a few minutes passed, and we hear knocking on the door, and people saying, "Tzal, tzal, tzal," which is like, IDF, 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 like, open up. We didn't open up because no. And then we heard a gunshot. They shot the lock so that they could enter. They had the schematics of every house, so they knew where to shoot. So they shot straight in front of the door, and then when they turn right, and there is a hallway where there's a bathroom and somebody can be in a position to shoot. So they instantly also shot there. And then they went to the safe room. They opened the door, they started shooting, and I immediately knew that my mom died because I was laying under her, and she was twitching, and I saw her lifeless face, so I immediately knew. They threw a grenade and there was a loud boom, and my dad yelled that he lost his arm. I started to feel a warm feeling in my stomach, and especially in my stomach, but also all over the body. And I had a weird taste in my mouth. And then the terrorists searched a little in the room, and then they left, and while they left, they laughed. A few minutes passed, and then I write to my family's WhatsApp group that we had, and from my mother's side, I wrote, "Mom and Dad are dead, sorry," because I never wanted to tell them something like this over a text. I have a dark sense of humor, so some of my family thought that I was joking or making a very bad joke. So sadly it wasn't. Time passes and the room starts to fill up with smoke. I talk to my family, I tell them that I think I've been shot, that there's too much smoke, I can't breathe. And it got to the point that I actually almost can't breathe, so I had to push my mom's body. And then when I got up, I saw that the room was covered in blood and flesh. And I realized that the taste that I had from before was my dad's flesh that just went straight into my mouth. I decided that I should go to the kitchen to grab some water. I sat near the cupboards of the kitchen. I was kind of hidden. And then I saw that my ankle was full of blood, my sock. And I also saw that I had a wound in my stomach. The reason why I didn't bleed to death was from my stomach was because I just had so much adrenaline that it stopped the bleeding. Thank God. It was a millimeter away from my intestines.
Was it part from the grenade?
No, a bullet.
Okay.
The projectile of the bullet. I had to delete the alert app because even if you put your phone on silent or do not disturb, it will still give you alerts. So I had to delete it.
And that's the missile alert.
Yeah.
Notification every time a missile is.
Yeah. In the area, not necessarily even in the kibbutz, also in the area. When I entered the house, you can immediately look into the safe room, and I just saw my dad's body in a pool of blood. I couldn't look there, so I just kept on moving through the house, and then I started hearing people speak in Arabic. So I rushed to my parents' room, and in the same situation, I hid between the bed and the wall, which is like where the mattress was. And I took a cover and covered myself in a way that a part of it will still be on the bed, so it'll look like they searched there, so that they won't try to pull the cover and search. In the house, you can hear every footstep, and I could tell where they were by the footsteps. So I could hear them going to the kitchen, opening drawers, opening the fridge, taking things to eat. Some of them were smoking inside the house. That was actually in the start of the day. When I exited, I still smelled not only the smoke from the burning couch that they lit a fire to draw people out, they also smoked hookahs and stuff like that.
They smoked a hookah?
A hookah.
In your home after killing your parents?
Yeah, and probably during as well. I could hear them walking closer and closer. I could hear them entering the room that I was in. There were two people in my room and the room that I was currently at. One of them was going to the closet, searching there for, I guess, valuables. That was probably when they took my mother's laptop. There was one who was right behind me. And then one of them yelled from the living room, and then they exited. I waited for an extra 30 minutes so that, just in case, nobody will be there. I managed to somehow survive all those hours. I got in contact with the person in the kibbutz who is in charge of communicating with the IDF to see how are they doing, when are they getting here. And I told her what happened. She said that she knows and that the IDF is coming. I waited for hours and hours and hours. I passed out a few times. I thought of just running outside and hoping for the best. They finally got there. The IDF finally got to me, but I still hid because just in case. They got into the room, into my room, and they took the weapon and fell under the cover. I told them not to kill me. I'm Israeli. And then they told me to get up slowly. And then they saw that I was also injured, so they helped me get up. They helped me move. They asked me if there was somebody else in the house. I told them no, both my parents were murdered. And then they slowly moved me throughout the neighborhood from house to house so that I'll be able to get closer to the evacuation, like armored vehicles, so that they'll be able to take me. They took me to the armored vehicle. In the meantime, I could still hear gunshots, explosions, and screaming and everything. That was 10 hours after my parents were murdered. They took me to the entrance of the kibbutz, where I saw that the front gate was broken down. And there was a tank next to where they took me. And then they moved me to another armored vehicle, where then they took me through the main road, one of the main roads of the regional council. On the way, I saw burnt cars, a tank that was going up in flames. There were bodies on that tank. They moved me, and then I got to an intersection where they moved me to another armored vehicle. And that intersection, it was horrific. There were so many bodies there. There were people with their head, you could see their brains, you can see their insides, you could see everything just laying there. They moved me into another armored vehicle, and they brought also an elderly couple. The husband was holding onto his finger that was shot, and then they took us to an area near Ofakim, where they moved us to an ambulance. Ambulances were not allowed to go close to our area because it was too dangerous. And the ambulance took us straight to the Soroka Hospital in Beersheba. There were hundreds of people in the reception, hundreds. People holding their body parts together, people just full of blood on them, people who were burnt, people, children, men, women, elderly people, it didn't matter. There, my grandparents and uncle came and they met me, and I got into a place where they did an x-ray, or I don't know, to see where what I had inside of my body. When I was on the gurney, I was waiting till I could go into the operation room. All of the operation rooms were full, so I had to wait like an hour. And right before I entered the operation room, I got a call from my sisters. During that time, I thought they were dead because they didn't have any reception, so I immediately thought that they were killed and their phones were destroyed or whatever, and that's the reason. And that was the first time I cried that day. We had to bury our parents. We had to go through all of that. I still couldn't accept it, that they were gone.
We now move to another area impacted in Israel on that fateful day and hear from Maya Roman. Maya's history involves her cousin Yeldin Roman Gat, Yeldin's husband Alon, and their young daughter Geffen, in addition to Carmel Gat and other family members. Yeldin, along with her husband Alon and daughter Geffen, were visiting her husband's family for the holiday in Kibbutz Be'eri, a kibbutz just over 5 miles away from the Gaza Strip, on October 7th.
My name is Maya Roman. I'm 38. I live in Tel Aviv with my husband. I was born in Givatayim, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv. Grew up focused on journalism and academia. I just got my PhD in philosophy of science. I am also a part of feminist advocacy here in Israel. So in 2012, I founded a feminist news organization called Politically Correct. It's a play on words in Hebrew. We were kind of the Israeli Me Too. It's an organization that I founded and ran and is still very much a part of feminist landscape here in Israel. Since then, I've focused on journalism and academia. Today, I'm the science reporter for Haaretz. That's me before October 7th. On October 7th, we woke up to the missile alarms at 6:30 a.m. We didn't know it was anything special. We thought they were just missile alarms, which sometimes happen. But because I work in journalism, I very quickly started getting a lot of WhatsApp messages, because Israelis, we talk on WhatsApp, about what's going on in the South. And a lot of my reporters started saying, we're seeing unusual things. We think there are terrorists in Sderot. We're hearing that there are hostages. We're hearing that there are people killed. And that whole day is, I think, very comparable to how Americans experienced 9/11. It's just this slowly unfolding of tragedy, like slowly realizing the magnitude of what was happening. I remember being shocked at the thought that there might be 5 hostages, where a few days later we would know that there are 255 hostages. My cousin Yarden, we are the closest in age among the cousins. We're both the same age, and she and her husband Alon had been living in Kibbutz Be'eri, which is very close to the Gaza border, for the past 4 years. They were raising their, at the time, 3-year-old daughter Geffen there. And they had just decided to leave the kibbutz. So in September, they actually moved out. Yarden felt that raising her daughter with the constant missile alarms wasn't making her the kind of parent she wanted to be, and they decided to leave. But on the 7th, they decided to, actually on the 6th, they decided to go back and visit Alon's family, his mother and father and sister that was staying there, for the holiday. It was Simchat Torah, the Israeli Jewish holiday. And they stayed the night. At 10:30 a.m., we lost contact with her. And for the rest of that day, we were in the dark, scanning social media, looking for any kind of information about what was happening. Again, we kept hoping for quite terrible scenarios. So our hope kept deteriorating. So it started with, well, maybe their batteries ran out and they're all stuck in the shelter. And then, well, maybe some terrorists took them, but maybe they're holding them at the mess hall. Because there were rumors initially that there were a lot of hostages from Be'eri being held within the kibbutz in the joint mess hall. And then during the night, when we found out that that wasn't true, we started hoping that she was taken hostage, because if she wasn't, then she might be dead. And then on the morning of the 8th, we got a call from Alon, Yarden's husband, who filled us in on what happened. He told us that around 10:30 a.m., 4 armed gunmen broke into his family home. His parents were at the kitchen bringing food back to the shelter. His mom was able to signal his dad, so his dad ran and hid in the bathroom. He was at the shelter with Yarden, their daughter Geffen, and his sister Carmel. And then basically the terrorists took them one by one first. So first they took Kinneret. Kinneret got Alon's mother, 68 at the time. We would later learn through videos on Instagram, her children would find videos on Instagram that she was executed. She was shot in the head along with other people from the kibbutz, just a few hundred meters from her home. Much later, we would find a video that the terrorists took of her, and she defiantly kind of sticks out her tongue at them. So that's the kind of woman she was. She was a kibbutz woman to the end. Later, they took Carmel, Alon's sister, which we did not know what had happened to her for many months after, and I'll talk about her in a bit. And lastly, they took Alon, Yarden, and Geffen. Alon begged them to leave Yarden and Geffen behind. As I said, Geffen was 3 years old at the time. They wouldn't listen. They tied Alon's hands and feet and put Geffen and Yarden in the car and got in the car with them. And they started driving. Before exiting the kibbutz, they also brought another hostage and put him in the trunk, Tal Shom. And then they started driving towards Gaza. About 500 meters before the Gaza border, Alon and Yarden seized an opportunity. The Jeep slowed down because it saw an Israeli tank nearby, and the armed gunmen went out to check out what was happening. So they were left in the car with just a driver, and they just looked at each other and decided that they're going to make a run for it. They jumped out of both sides of the moving car. Yarden was holding Geffen in her arms, and they started running for their lives. Very quickly, I was with Alon, and he showed me, like, after seconds, the terrorists spotted them, started shooting at them, and they ran and searched for cover. And very shortly after that, Yarden realized that she wasn't going to make it. Alon is a runner, and she is not. So she did what she says is the easiest decision of her life, and she gave her daughter over to Alon so he could seek cover. She stayed behind. Alon was able to find a ditch near a road and basically placed Geffen down, placed himself on top of her, covered himself with leaves and dirt, and he stayed that way for 8 hours with a 3-year-old child, listening to cars searching for them. I don't know how she kept quiet. I don't know what he told her to keep her quiet. When it got dark, he started to make his way back to the kibbutz. He was barefoot at the time because they were all in their pajamas. They were taking in their pajamas. But he was able to find, like, socks that someone left on the road and a towel that he let Geffen sleep on for a little bit, and just very slowly made his way back. And by morning, luckily found the IDF forces, because Be'eri at the time was still under fire. It was under fire for a few days after. So it's amazing that he didn't encounter any other terrorists on his way back. And he found the IDF forces, and he called us to say, I'm okay and Geffen is okay, but I don't know what happened to Yarden, and I don't know what happened to Carmel, and I don't know what happened to my mom. You know, those first few days were chaos. The first week we were very much just trying to figure out what had happened. So we had no confirmation that Yarden was actually kidnapped. So every day her brother Gili would drive down to Be'eri, see all the burnt cars on the road, get there. Again, the place was still under fire, and basically begged the IDF soldiers to come with him and go look for his sister, because we thought in the middle of all this chaos, no one is going to go looking for one particular person, especially seeing as she was taken very close to the border. So, as I said, from the same house were taken Kinneret, Carmel, and Yarden. Kinneret was murdered, as I mentioned. Carmel was taken separately from Alon, Yarden, and Geffen. And so basically for the first few months, we had no idea what was happening with her. We knew that she was taken hostage, but other than that, we had no way of knowing what had happened to her along the way. We knew what had happened to Yarden because Alon was there to tell us. When the first hostage deal was announced, the first deal was supposed to be for all the women and children. And every day, the way it worked was that every day they would announce who was on the list for the next day. So every day you would get a call from the military representative telling you if your loved one was going to be on the list or not going to be on the list for the following day. And that was one of the hardest weeks for us because there wasn't much left to do. All we could do was wait, and every day wait and hear if Yarden and Carmel were coming back or not. But so we kept advocating for both Yarden and Carmel. And during the first hostage deal, they were both supposed to come back. The deal was for all the women and children. But it was very tense because every day things would shift and move, and it seemed like the deal might collapse at any moment. So every day we waited to hear if they were going to be released next day. The army would call us every night and say if they are or aren't on the list for the following day. I think it was seventh or eighth day that we learned that Yarden was going to be released the following day. It was amazing. Waiting for her to be released was probably the hardest thing we had to do. All this time, this month and so that Yarden was gone, Geffen knew what was happening. We couldn't hide it from her daughter, because she was taken herself. And also she was at the house where we were all constantly working. So she constantly asked, why are there so many people here? And we would tell her, well, we're all looking for mom. Mom got lost and everyone's basically looking for mom. And on that 8th day, we got to wake her up at 2 a.m. and tell her that we found mom and we're going to go bring her back. We all went to the hospital. Around 12 p.m., we saw Yarden when she was being transported to the Egyptian border. And that was the first time, when I saw her walk, I knew that she was Yarden, because you don't know what happened to, you have no idea. But she walked like herself, and that was very good to see. It took a lot longer until she was finally back in the hospital. We were around 3 a.m., I think. We all went to the hospital. And as we went to the hospital, I was waiting like in one corridor because I wanted to give them some space. And all of a sudden, I see Geffen running towards me, screaming at the top of her lungs, you have to come see, you have to come see. We found mom, we found mom. And it's, I think, the best memory I have, I don't know, ever. Yarden came back physically okay, mentally still dealing with a lot of what happened back there. She was very lucky in the sense that she was held in a family home, not in the tunnels. She was held by a family and guarded by Hamas guards. She talked about many things. Yarden is very smart. She speaks Arabic, and she survived. She, not befriended, but she made sure to talk to her captors so that they liked her, so that they felt sorry for her. She initially did not know what happened to Alon and Geffen, but they let her listen to Israeli radio for a little while every day. And one day she heard Alon's cousin Gil dedicate a song, and he dedicated it to her and to Carmel. And she realized that if he's specifically mentioning her and Carmel, that means that Geffen and Alon are home and are okay. But she made a point not to mention that to her captors, because she wanted them to continue and feel for her. She was forced to wear a hijab the second she got into Gaza. She said when she entered Gaza, that was one of the scariest moments. She said being taken into Gaza was an experience like no other. First, the dawning that the kibbutz was not in our hands anymore. When she saw the throngs of people coming in through Gaza, she said that's when she realized, oh, the IDF's not coming. Like something is wrong. And once she was in Gaza, she said she was presented like a trophy. People wanted to come and look and see and gawk at her and praise her captors. She said it was, Yarden is also quite a feminist, so she talks about it in feminist words. So she said it was just the actual experience of being objectified, of being treated as an object. She said, I was not a person. I was a trophy, like something won in a football match, and they were showing me around to everyone. Then she was taken to this home. She was given an Arabic name. So because they knew not to call her by her name because they know that the IDF is constantly searching and listening. And she was given a hijab to wear, which she said she actually wanted to continue wearing because she felt safer that way. She said she didn't want to stick out in any way to the people around her. She wanted to assimilate as much as possible so they would treat her well. She has a lot of nuanced experiences from that time, like a lot of realizations, specifically of the difference between, for example, the Hamas guards and the family that she was held in their house. You know, she spoke to these guards and she can explain precisely their motivations, which are jihad. Like, you know, she said, I had several conversations with them and they would tell me, yeah, what we want is a Muslim empire. You can live in our Muslim empire as a Jew, but it's going to be a Muslim empire. And she tried to she told them, well, you know, we can't live in a place like that because we're a liberal society. And they told her, well, women have rights in our countries as well. She asked them, what about men who live together? She didn't say gay because she said, oh no, that's not possible. She spoke to them about her German citizenship and they told her, well, maybe you should move to Germany when you get back home, but we also have people in Germany, so we're not sure. They talk like people who have global jihadist goals. It's not an exaggeration. Like some people think that's really what many of these people want, whether they've been brainwashed or that's what they want. It's not all the people in Gaza, as again, Yarden was also held with a family there who were not Hamas necessarily. But the Hamas guards who were holding her, this was their objective. This is what they wanted. They kept talking about coming back to where their grandparents were from. That they want to come back to Sderot and different places in Israel. And again, warning her that when she is released, she should leave. There are many things that she still hasn't talked about, but those are the things that she feels comfortable talking about. She also, anytime feels like the way she was treated isn't necessarily indicative of how other hostages were treated. Many of them were treated much, much worse. So she considers herself, again, lucky in a weird way, which is also why she doesn't want to talk about it that much. And when she came back and told us all of this, she, of course, immediately asked, what about Carmel? And we told her that Carmel was supposed to come back the following day or in a couple of days. The following day, Carmel wasn't on the list. And the day after that, the deal fell through. Hamas would not give the name of 10 living women. They insisted on changing the list order. Specifically, they wanted to treat some of the women as female soldiers, even though they were not. So for some reason, they considered Carmel a soldier. I don't know why. Maybe because she's not married, wasn't a mother. She was about 40 years old. And our negotiators insisted that we should not continue to deal with 10 different names. So we should insist on the 10 names of the women. And so the deal fell through. It's easy to look back and say, oh, maybe we should have continued the deal because it would take more than a year to get back to the table and get more hostages out. But at the time, it was very hard to make that consideration, so I really don't know. But the deal fell through, and I think that was the first time I saw Yarden cry, was when we learned that Carmel was not coming back. We did learn from 2 younger children that were released during that first deal that they were held with Carmel. So we finally knew a little bit of what happened to her. We knew that she was alive. We learned that she saw her mother's body as she was taken into Gaza. And we learned that she really helped those kids who were with her. She made them keep a journal. She practiced yoga and meditation with them. Yarden asked us to keep advocating for Carmel and for all the other hostages, while she very wisely wanted to stay out of the limelight and start taking care of herself and her daughter and getting back to her life. And so we kept the rest of the family going around the world, trying to make sure another deal happened. In July of 24, we were in the United States. We met with everyone. It was a very hard time because it felt like a deal was extremely close. In early July, it was extremely close. A deal was on the table that Carmel was supposed to be released in. And then, again, everything went terribly wrong. And I think a lot of the people who could have made a deal happen were concerned with different things. But unfortunately, I got back home the next day. And that Saturday, I was at Hostage Square, where we have hostage demonstrations every week here in Israel, when we started getting calls asking us if we've heard the rumors, which I had not. Apparently, there was a rumor going on Telegram that the IDF retrieved 6 bodies of hostages previously considered to be alive. And on that list was Carmel's name. I spoke to Carmel's family, and we decided to wait because that was the only thing we could do. And it's very weird because waiting felt very much like waiting for Yarden because there's nothing you can do. We sat for many hours at Hostage Square, and I sat with some other hostage families, and there's also this terrible feeling of, well, if it's not Carmel, it's someone else. We waited that way for most of the night when about 3:30 a.m. The military came to Carmel's father's home where he was staying and told him that it was in fact Carmel, along with 5 other hostages, including Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who were murdered in a tunnel. Carmel survived for 9 months in terrible, inhumane conditions. We saw the tunnel where she was held. She could not stand upright. There was no light. There was no food. There was nothing. She survived there with these 5 other hostages for so long. But when their captors heard the IDF coming in, closing in, which is something that we warned about. We warned about the IDF entering Rafah at the time and entering various places where we were concerned that hostages were being held. The IDF entered that area in Tel Sultan, and her captors realized that they were going to get caught. So they decided to murder them, execute them. They shot them point blank, all 6 of them, and ran. That was almost a year ago to the day. We keep seeing the videos that Hamas releases of hostages who are starving. You see them and they look like Holocaust survivors. And it is intolerable cruelty and unimaginable that they are still there. So among other things, because I'm someone who comes from progressive side, from feminist work, I wanted to reach out to those organizations, even though some of the families said, there's nothing, we shouldn't talk to these people, they're not going to help us. I have real faith in activists. I still do, but at the time I had more. And I thought, we shouldn't give up before trying. We should talk to these people. For starters, what I realized was it was almost impossible to get in the room and speak to people. I, as I said, come from feminist work. So I wanted to meet with feminist organizations, and it was almost impossible to get any non-Jewish feminist organization to just have a meeting with me. They were very suspicious of my motives. And it took me forever. I was finally able to meet one feminist organization in Boston. And what was interesting was once we sat down, it was very clear that we speak the same language. We come from the same line of work. We have the same values. And I told them, all I want is for you to talk about hostage taking as, among other things, a crime against women, which it is. My cousin was taken. She feared that she might get raped at any moment. We know now that some of the hostages experienced sexual assault. This is a crime against women, among other things. And we as feminists must be able to stand up against it. It has nothing to do with other considerations in the conflict going on. This is just us as feminists standing together. And they said, well, yeah, we realize what you're saying, but if we write something specifically about this issue, it's going to look weird. Like, why are we covering this issue specifically? And our Muslim community fellows and our Palestinian community members are going to be irate, and it's going to put us in hot water. And eventually they published something generally about crimes of war and how they affect women all over the world, which, as someone who works in that area, I understand. I understand that an organization that's American and doesn't have a particular connection to the situation going on here would be like, well, if I cover this particular situation, I'm saying something. At the same time, I feel very strongly that as feminists, we are supposed to put our ability to resist violence against women above any other kind of political consideration. And this holds for both sides. I am able to be critical when my side, my government, does terrible things. But I need everyone to be able to be critical when Hamas sexually assaults hostages and people. And the conversation that we have seen around that has been terrible. Just in an example, as someone who works in feminist journalism, one of the things we work really hard for is to make sure that, what Me Too was about was that we are able to believe women, that when women come forward, we don't have to question their stories 700 times because we know that then they won't come forward. And Amit Susna was one of the hostages who came back and was interviewed by the New York Times about the sexual assault that she experienced. And the level of scrutiny that the New York Times held her to, which on the one hand I understand because they wanted it to be above reproach, but on the other hand, they made her take a polygraph test. They had her deliver WhatsApp messages that she sent to her friends the moment she came back. They spoke to her doctor. Like, this is a level that most women cannot stand. We will not have reports of sexual assault if this is the level that we demand of our victims. And I have been fighting here in Israel to make sure that we do not hold our victims to these insane standards because that's why we don't hear them. And still, by the way, many people question her account and question sexual assault against women, even though she really stood incredible scrutiny. So I feel the global feminist movement has done something very problematic, not just against Israeli women, against ourselves as the feminist movement, when we are sacrificing our values for different political considerations. We are going back. We were supposed to make sure that these issues are the first issues, the only issues, and that's not what's happening at the moment. And the same is true about different kinds of progressive organizations. So I spoke in a lot of college campuses, and I found it very important. And I've gotten all sorts of feedback, but I thought having a conversation was important. But again, you can't have the conversation with everyone, because many people don't even want to come in the room when they hear that you're part of the hostage families. And so, for example, I was on Columbia College campus. I think this was around April of 24. It was before the big demonstrations in the States, but there was still pro-Palestine movement on campus. And I had just given a talk with mostly Jewish students, and I was coming out and I saw this pro-Palestine kind of booth. And I thought, maybe I should go talk to them. Because again, I can understand their point of view to an extent. So maybe if I talk to them, I can explain that in my view, releasing the hostages and ending the war go hand in hand. And so I don't see why they can't incorporate messages asking for releasing of the hostages into their ongoing messages. Like, I didn't want to ask them to not talk about Free Palestine. Just could you also incorporate this message that we also have to free the hostages, which is, again, in my opinion, a humanitarian issue that has nothing to do with the ongoing conflict. And I came up to them. There were two young women, and I told them who I was, that I was part of the hostage families, that part of my family was, Carmel was at the time still held in Gaza, and that I would like to talk to them about whether they can incorporate messages about the hostages. And one of them just looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'm sorry for your family, but I think the issue of the hostages is just Israeli propaganda." And what am I supposed to do with that? What am I supposed to say to that? When you're not even being allowed into the conversation. I think one of the things I've encountered, and actually I have a very specific example of this. My organization, my feminist organization, we work with a sister Palestinian organization. We try to create joint coverage of the conflict, joint feminist coverage, and it's very hard work. We've been doing it for 4 years. It's hard work because it's about building trust and having really difficult conversations. And it's very hard work. But my Palestinian colleagues, some of the first people to have called me on October 7th to ask what I need. And by the way, have given me a lot of actual help. These are women that I consider friends, family, and they know that I see them the same way. And we have no problem amongst ourselves. They have no problem condemning Hamas, just as they know that I have no problem with criticizing my government and saying that what's happening in Gaza right now is, in my opinion, very bad. We are able to create this space where it doesn't have to be one or the other. We can see both wrong sides of this equation and think about how we can correct it together. And there was one point in time where a big university, we were talking there, and one of the professors heard about my organization and said, "Why don't you guys come here and speak at our forum? And, have some of your Palestinian colleagues and have some of your Israeli colleagues and just have a panel about this journalistic coverage from a feminist perspective of what's going on." Great. And this was a challenge to arrange because, again, for my Palestinian colleagues, it's not that easy. They might get a lot of harsh criticism from all sorts of places. And but we were able to arrange this, and everyone on our side said, "Let's go." And that was when the university pulled away because they realized that they were going to get a lot of blowback from Palestinian organizations on campus who think that it's normalization of Israel if we have a joint panel of Israeli and Palestinian journalists. Just the inability to hold that conversation seems insane to me. I mean, again, here, in the midst of what's happening, in the midst of a war, in the midst of my family being taken hostage and these women having family members who have died, we are able to talk and try and think about how we can create a better future and what are the problems here and the terrible things that Hamas is doing and the terrible things that Israel is sometimes doing and how do we build something better. But whenever we try and take this to places that are not here, suddenly the discussion becomes too sensitive. And I find that insane. Like, how is it possible that the people immediately affected by this terrible, terrible conflict and war are able to hold these conversations? And these are women, again, who have lost people, and we're still able to sit down and talk. And there are things we completely disagree about, but we are still able to have this conversation. But if we try to import this complex conversation anywhere else, no, especially in the States, it's too much. We can't even listen to you on a college campus, which again, as a college professor, I find insane. It is against what higher education is meant to achieve.
The people of Gaza only decided to break the siege, the walls of the concentration camp, on October 7th. And yes, I was happy to see people breaking the siege and throwing down the shackles of their own land and walk free into their lands that they were not allowed to walk in. And yes, the people of Gaza have the right to self-defense, have the right to defend themselves. And yes, Israel as an occupying power does not have that right to self-defense. Gaza became the liberation source, the inspiration for people. Gaza transformed many minds around the world.